but I will be around. I'll be around for the um, other presentations the next 2 weeks as well. So.
Great. And Olivia, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Thanks, Johanna. My name's Olivia Kovacs. I also work for UW Extension Forestry. I'm in Columbia County, and I'm really excited you all were able to join us. And I hope you all came with some great questions for the chat and ready to hear Ben's presentation for tonight. And we'll see you the next 3 nights.
Yeah. So before we get started with the fun stuff, we just have a quick poll that we all are going to ask you to fill out. Just as being a part of Extension, we're required to ask these questions because they're funding through the federal government. If you would prefer not to respond, I prefer not to respond is a perfectly reasonable answer. We're just supposed to ask. So I'll give folks just a minute to fill out the survey if they would like. Okay, just gonna give it 15 more seconds. We just had a couple of people pop in. So for the new folks, if you'd like to fill out the survey for us quickly, that would be great. Okay, I'm gonna end the poll here because it seems like we're done. There we go. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate you filling that out for us. Yeah, so I think we are ready to get started
All right.
with the good stuff. So I'll pass it off to Ben.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Let me get organized here. Can you guys all see that? Does that look good? Okay,
Yep.
sweet. Sounds good. So there we go. So yep, tonight's presentation is going to be on getting to know local and invasive plants. We're also going to go over some forest health concerns that are common locally and across the state. We're going to kind of give you some of the basics on how to identify trees. You should all have a packet. There is a tree dichotomous key identification key. You'll be needing that tonight to look through because there'll be a little bit of an activity with that. But yeah, we'll kind of go over some of the basics of what we see in Wisconsin and kind of give you the tools to identify what's in your woods, just to kind of know what's there to give you a baseline. 'Cause next week we're going to be talking about management practices and kind of dive in more deep that way. So this is kind of more just a groundwork. So yeah, first we're going to talk about how to use a tree key. You should have that in your packet. So a tree ID key or a dichotomous key kind of gives you like the roadmap to figure out what trees you have. It's kind of a step-by-step process, almost like a choose your own adventure, where you have two options based on what you're seeing on the tree, and you go step by step based on the characteristics of the tree. A lot of times it's with using the leaves, barks, or the twigs, and there's some other specific stuff we can look at that we'll get into in a minute. But sometimes we don't always have leaves. If you have to identify a tree in the wintertime, you're going to need to be able to utilize everything you can on that tree to try to figure out what it is. There's also some really helpful tree identification apps out there. I personally use them myself, even for my work. There's things that stump me from time to time. Those can be helpful just to check yourself or at least get close to figuring out what you want to, or figuring close to figuring out what you're trying to identify. They're not always accurate, so you got to take that with a grain of salt, but they can be helpful tools as well. Um, One thing I'll mention with identifying trees, it just takes some practice. If you're not as familiar with it, just take some time getting to know it. I always like to compare it to like recognizing someone's face that you know. You just subconsciously know how to recognize them just by looking at them. You don't really have to think why or why you recognize them. Same goes with the trees. They can just look at a sugar maple and see it, know it's a sugar maple without even thinking about it. So it'll just repetition helps, and over time you'll get to know the trees a little bit better. So there's a lot of different types of tree ID books. You can find a lot of different stuff online, different publications. So it's good to find something that you personally like and works for you. It's going to vary by region. So there's some specifically for Wisconsin for the trees that we have here in the state. And there's all sorts of tree ID books, or not tree ID books, dichotomous keys, I should say. It can be for other non-woody plants. It can be for animals. There's a lot of different things out there that you can utilize. So, but the dichotomous key, like I mentioned, is just going to give you options, and you can give you like two options, and it's going to kind of work your way through and whittle your way down to figuring out what tree species you're looking at. So let's start off with some basics. Some of the stuff might be obvious, but we'll start pretty simple and kind of work our way down. So there's two kinds of trees, types of trees that we're going to be working with, either your coniferous or your deciduous. Your coniferous, otherwise known as evergreens, are you just going to be your trees with needles and cones, like your like.
Ben, are you
And
there?
you may
He
have
froze.
just frozen.
Yeah.
He froze.
That's
Um,
okay. I can pick it up. He'll probably just pop in very shortly. It's, a lot of people on. If people don't mind also turning off their camera, that helps for some of these bandwidth situations.
Oh, okay.
And if you don't know where your camera icon is, if you look in the lower left-hand corner of your screen and hover your mouse over the zoom area, there's an old-fashioned camera. And that is where the video camera might be.
Okay, cut out for a second there.
Called it. I knew you'd be back, Ben.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. Let me
That's
reshare my
okay.
screen. So, okay. Are we back good now?
Yes.
All good.
Okay, sweet. So anyways, I was talking about deciduous trees. So sometimes known as hardwood trees. This comes from the timber industry, because typically the timber used for deciduous trees is turned into more boards and lumber, whereas sometimes like coniferous trees will be called softwood trees. So that's a term you might hear as well, just because it's kind of more used for pulp and fiber products, things like that. So the first question you're going to get on your key is this tree have needles or does broad leaves? Basically, is it a conifer or is it a deciduous tree? For the conifers, you're going to have to look at the needles and see what's kind of the pattern of it. Needles can be on there individually on the branch. As you can see on the left, it looks like a fir. You can see the needles attached individually on that branch. Or the picture on the right looks to be a red pine. They come in a group or cluster. In that case, it's two, and it can vary by species. So, for instance, a red pine will have a group of two needles that meet at one point, whereas like a white pine might have about five. So that's going to help narrow it down. Another thing to look at is if it's flattened and scaly, like a white cedar has kind of more of those scaly foliage on it. So that's going to help us break it down. Leaves for the hardwoods and for the deciduous trees, the leaves can come in two different types of leaf shapes. You have just a simple leaf that's just your standard leaf with a petiole that of the one leaf that attaches right to the branch. So like in that case, that's a red oak. They just have a simple leaf. The picture on the right there that looks to be an ash tree leaf, that's a compound leaf. You might look at that picture and say, yeah, there's five leaves on that branch, where technically it's pretty much one leaf, and those are what we call leaflets on there. And they're attached to a petiole, not the actual stem of the tree. So that whole thing will actually come off in the fall. And that's actually not a branch. So we'll talk about it a little bit later and we'll have some pictures. But what you want to look for is if you pull off a leaf or if it falls off in the fall, it will leave a leaf scar on that stem, where if one of the leaflets gets pulled off on the petiole, there will not be a leaf scar there. So simple and compound leaves, like the compound leaves would be like ash trees or like a honey locust or maybe a walnut. Next, we want to look at the branching pattern. So you're going to have opposite and alternating. In that picture to the right, you can see it. That'd be like an ash tree. You can see the branches come off, or like the leaves and the branches will be opposite, so they come off at the same point on each side. Whereas the bottom picture, or the second one on the picture, is a hickory, and you can see it's alternated there. Um, Note that the leaflets aren't opposite and alternating. Those can a lot of times are opposite, so don't get that confused. That's why it's good to know if you're looking at a compound leaf or not, so you can tell if the branching is opposite or alternate. So most trees that we work with are alternating. The ones that are opposite are like your maples and ash or like dogwood. So most of the time it's going to be alternate species if it's not the ash or maple. So next we'll want to look at the leaf shape. Leaves obviously come in different shapes and sizes. We have, elongated ones, ones that are more round, ones that have significant sinuses and lobes on them, and different edges to them. You can see on the bottom there. You might see your typical leaf that's just smooth, but it might have rough edges on there, or actually like what we call teeth on there. Um, it can vary on size, so that's going to help us narrow down what tree it is to, because sometimes similar species can have serrated edges, but some will be a lot more prominent than other species. So good to look at those fine characteristics. And like I said, your dichotomous key will kind of break that down for you step by step, and you'll be able to look at it. So again, I mentioned this a second ago, sinuses and lobes, you'll hear that term or you see that on there. So it's pretty straightforward. The sinus is the cavity in the leaf, or the lobe is the inverse where it sticks out on the leaf. So, and then you can see there too, the petiole is kind of, again, it's not a branch, it's just like the stem of that individual leaf that attaches to the branch. This example here, you have two different tree species that are very similar, and you can see some notable examples. We have a sugar maple on the left side and then a red maple on the right side. They look pretty similar, but some of the key differences on there, as you can see on the red maple, it has more of serrated edges, where on the sugar maple, it's more smooth. Also, the sinuses on a red maple might not be as prominent as they are on a sugar maple. So just an example of things to kind of look out for. Using twigs can also be helpful. Back when I was in forestry school, we had to take an exam once where they had tables full of twigs and we had to identify the trees. So it's definitely challenging to do that, but it can be a useful skill. So that's not something we use often, but especially in the wintertime, it can be helpful if you're kind of scratching your head looking at a tree, if you can't tell by the bark. One method is to just take a twig and cut it in half or snap it in half and look at the inside of it. The inside is what we call the pith. Um, there can be different shapes, as you can see there. It can just be round, or it can have maybe a shape or angled pith. And then also looking at is if that pith is solid in the middle or if it's more hollow and chambered can help you determine which tree it is. It's hard to remember what each pith of each tree is. I definitely don't know all that. But if you have that information, you can always look it up and figure it out or use your key to help figure out which tree it is. And then at the bottom there, you see that picture there is kind of what I was mentioning before. The leaf is when it falls is gonna leave that leaf scar. And that can be a good way to identify a tree. Each species, when it loses its leaves, will leave a unique leaf scar. So it can be a great way to tell between two trees. We'll have a picture in a little bit of the ash trees, and that's a good example of similar trees, different ash species, and how they leave different leaf scars. Above that is going to be the auxiliary bud. That's what's actually going to show up, later in the summer into the fall, and then that will be swell up the following spring and then turn into a branch going forward. And those buds will be unique by species as well. All right, so we're gonna use our keys here in a second. I'm gonna talk about a couple key species that we see here in Wisconsin first and some characteristics. And then we'll have an example for the third one for you to actually work through the key. So if you can get those ready in a second here. So the first tree I want to talk about is white pine. This is across the whole state. We have this tree. If you're using your key, if you walk up to this tree and try to figure out what it is and try to figure out that it's a white pine, what are you looking for? I mean, you can see the needles and the cones, obviously this is a conifer. But if you look closely at the branches, you're saying, hey, these are elongated needles. They're, in clusters, or groups or whatever you want to call it. And it looks like there's about five per group. So you can kind of key in on that. Again, bark it'll take some time to kind of get used to what the bark looks like on certain species if you're not as familiar with that. But that'll be over time, I think, the quickest way. And that's for us foresters, is just looking at the bark is usually the quickest way we identify trees, just because you kind of get familiar with it. For example, here you have the bark of the white pine. It's a little bit more grayish in color compared to like a red pine. We'll have that more lightish red color and kind of undertones to it. So couple quick facts about white pine. It's been kind of a staple for the lumber industry in Wisconsin since people settled here. It can become one of the largest and oldest trees that we do have in Wisconsin. Many of the very large ones were logged off back in the day when I think it was settled. But it's still a major component of our timber market. The pine market has struggled a little bit as of late, just because of a lot of the pulp mills that make paper have shut down, and it's kind of limited the market. So, but white pine can be used not only for paper, but it can be used for boards as well, and real timber. So it's a good resource that we have, a major component up north, but definitely very prevalent in other parts of the state too. So. The next conifer that's kind of unique that I wanted to mention was tamarack. This tree is unique is because it's considered a coniferous deciduous. It's kind of a blend of both. So it's a coniferous tree because it has the needles, has the cones like your typical evergreen tree, but it doesn't always stay green. You can see in the picture on the bottom right that tamarack has got a real beautiful, golden yellow color to it. They will shed their needles every fall and grow new ones. So it's a unique tree in that way. So if you have tamarack, don't be alarmed. I've had calls for that before where people are worried about their trees dying and it's just them losing their needles for the winter. Tamarack will have a lot of needles per cluster, usually shorter and a little softer. So yeah, it's kind of a unique conifer that we have. Typically in lowland areas, grows in bogs. It can grow in upland areas too if it's planted there. It's a unique tree. It's utilized a lot for its rot resistant. It's really good at that long term. So a lot of times they use it for fencing, so it can kind of withstand that rot, and also used for railroad ties and other things too. So. Yeah, so with that, we're gonna do an activity to try to identify this tree. I would say if you are good at tree ID already and know what this tree is, still work through the tree key just to kind of get used to it and practice a little bit, and see if you can follow through. So if everyone wants to grab their key and just go step by step, again, you're going to start at the top on that first page and follow, and it'll say like a number. So like, for example, you're going to start with the conifer page and it's going to say if needles are single or are they in bundles. And if it says their needles are single, then you'll go to the third line and so on and so forth. So yeah, if you want to take a couple minutes here to work through, and then maybe in the chat, if you could, once you get an answer and find it on the dichotomous key, put that in the chat, and then I'll talk through it afterwards.
It looks like some folks are having trouble accessing the key. So maybe I guess we have to keep sharing because they have moved. Oh, Olivia's on it. So it looks like there is a key link in.
If you look in the chat, everybody, I just put in a link to the key that we can use, or it's very similar to the one, and that should work for you to use, and it's the same one that I sent out, or Johanna sent out in the packet. The difference is this one being the online tool that you can go through online. The one that we sent in a packet, you can print out and have it in a packet in the field. I can also link that to in the chat as well.
Yeah, some of these pictures can be hard to tell, so if anyone has any questions, let me know, but it's fine. Just about practicing the key. So um, yeah. Oops. Looks like we're getting a couple answers in here. All
There
right,
was a,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was just gonna say there was a question about scale related to needles.
Yeah,
Which,
so I don't know if we have a picture of a white cedar. So think about like your arborvitae. Um, it's gonna be flat and scaly and kind of branch out like that instead of a point. So yeah, I have to look up a picture maybe of that, but a white cedar would be a good example of where it'd be scaly and flat, like your arborvitae, typical arborvitae. All right, so it looks like we're getting answers in here, and looks like you guys are nailing it. So, oops, I think my presentation. Give me 1 second here. I'm gonna. Looks like it kicked me out for a second. I'm gonna stop sharing here in a second.
You all were pretty spot on with the identification. I think I saw all correct answers with the balsam fir. So that's exciting. I don't want to take the wind out of your sails, Ben, but I'm going to let you load so I can so you don't have to
Yeah,
feel so pressured.
I'm gonna stop share here. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to relog in here. Let me
So
hang
one
on
of the
one
big
sec.
things for balsam fir is one of our conifers. We don't see it as much native in southern Wisconsin where I am or where Johanna is. Sometimes if you have it planted on your land, that's really exciting. And a big thing for balsam fir is a lot of people call them the friendly fir is because their needles lie flat. And when you touch them, they're not nearly as prickly or pokey as a spruce are. The needles also I have just like one needle per fascicle or per bundle, like the white pine he was talking about, 5 needles coming out of that fascicle. And then they're also going to lie flat. A spruce, if you actually pick up the needle and you roll it between your fingers, the spruce will feel like it'll have 4 sides to it. So you feel it roll around, and this fir will just be completely flat. And then another identifier is in Ben's presentation, you saw that the picture of the trunk, and there was those like pustules of sap almost is like the right word for them, is that it's actually filled with sap right there. And if you find a really big one, you took a stick to it and poked it, sap and kind of Christmas tree smell will come out and fly at you. Does anyone have any balsam fir on their property? Let us know, either like you can unmute yourself or you can say so in the chat. Just something really exciting to have in southern Wisconsin.
and I also have a presentation ready to go. So
Okay,
if it would
I,
be
th
easier for me to share,
I
just
think
let me know.
I think I just got it back up. It kicked
Okay.
me out, and I had to get a new code. So we're good. I think I'm just popping it up here in a second. So all right, it's loading right now. All right, let me try this again. All right, can you guys see that now?
we can.
Okay, sounds good. So, yeah, we will move on then. Let's see here. All right. So deciduous trees. We'll go over a couple of the common deciduous trees that we see in Wisconsin. There's at least a couple notable ones. Um, First one we'll talk about is sugar maple, sometimes also known as hard maple for its timber quality. This is the state tree of Wisconsin. If you look at this one here, if you're trying to do tree ID, you can see that it has that opposite branching. You can see on the left side there how the leaves come out opposite. And you can see it's a simple leaf. It's not a compound leaf. That leaf petiole attaches directly to that branch. And then you can see it's pretty smooth on the edge, which kind of showed in the picture earlier in a previous slide. Again, some sugar maple facts. Again, it's a state tree of Wisconsin. If you're into maple syruping, you'll know that it takes quite a lot of sap from a maple tree to make actual syrup, 40-to-1 ratio when you boil it down. So it's a lot. But again, it's a good timber product in the state. Used for a lot of different things like flooring, furniture, bowling alleys even. So it's been a kind of a staple throughout the years in Wisconsin for that. Um, Sugar maple is probably our most shade tolerant species that we have. You'll see it a lot of times coming up in the heavier understories, and it kind of grows in more of a shady environment. Also produces a shady environment because of its heavy leaves that it does have. So just good to know for management strategy. Sometimes you'll see maple come up and if there's limited sunlight available. Ash trees are another one to talk about. As probably many of you know, a lot of the ash trees have died throughout Wisconsin or are making its way through the state. So, still a good tree to know. It was obviously a staple for years in the state. But again, we talked about earlier, you got that compound leaf when you're identifying it. It has unique bark on it, as you can see on the right. It's kind of got those deep ridges to it. But the number of leaflets is going to help you determine what kind of ash tree it is. It can be difficult to tell the difference. Here's some examples. We have three main ash species here in Wisconsin, the white, green, and black. I think typically the white ash have less leaflets than like the green or the black. You'll see them kind of grow in different spots. Like the little white ash is more of an upland species in your upland forest, whereas like black ash, more your lowland ash species, and then green can kind of go in between. So, as I mentioned before, you can see the bottom pictures. Those are the leaf scars we're talking about. So, maybe you know, you're like, hey, I know this is an ash tree, but I'm just not quite sure which kind it is. One thing you can key into is that leaf scar. You look at that picture on the left, and you can see it's kind of like a U shape. That auxiliary bud is kind of overlapping it a little bit, where the one on the right for the green ash almost looks like a shield. So unique leaf scars, and also typically they have unique auxiliary buds as well, so that can help you narrow down if you're close. So, a couple facts about ash trees. Again, it was used for timber, commonly used in baseball bats, make baskets out of it, skis, snowshoes. But unfortunately, most of it's being used for firewood these days because trees are going to have a hard time getting back to a good timber size in the future, since emerald ash borers still be around for the foreseeable future. So they typically, well, at least from what I've seen, is trees with compound leaves will lose their leaves earlier than the simple leaves. So, like walnut, for example, is another compound leaf tree that'll lose its tree or leaves early. So, look out for that in the fall. With ash trees, again, this is like an opposite branching species. So sometimes they'll have like a crow's feet type of look to it, where it splits off and forks off like that. So. All right, red oak is another prominent tree that's found across the state. So oak is a very valuable timber species for us too. I mean, if you're trying to identify a red oak, what you're going to want to look for as you're looking at these pictures, is it opposite or alternate? So there's no leaves on this on that branch on the left, but you can see where those auxiliary buds are that are going to be branches coming up the next growing season. You can see they're kind of alternating. Oaks, a lot of times, will have that cluster of buds on the top of it as well. So that's a unique characteristic of it. Again, this is a simple leaf. it's pointed and not rounded. And I'll go over that in the next slide because that's a key difference. One thing I wanted to point out too is that you can see there's two pictures of red oak leaves, and they look kind of different. They're kind of similar, but the leaves are a little different. It's good to know that there's can be a kind of genetic variance within trees. So not every red oak is going to look perfectly the same as the next one with the leaves. Within your forest, it might look different than the next forest over, or just between two different trees, they just might have different genetics and different characteristics. So that can throw you off a little bit if you're looking at a tree, because you might look at that and say, hey, maybe that's a black oak, and it can throw you off. A couple red oak facts, and just oaks in general, they tend to have their leaves on kind of throughout the winter. They'll be browned up. They'll lose some of them, but easy to spot in the winter time because of that. They're great for wildlife, especially when they get larger, great for cavities. And then obviously the acorns provide great forage in the fall for a lot of wildlife, and that really helps them get through winter and get the energy they need to get through. So this graphic's a good one to kind of talk about a few things. So we got these are the common oak trees that we have in Wisconsin, the ones you'll mostly find. Um, there's two groups of oak trees. You're gonna have your white oak group and your red oak group. So the top row is what we consider the white oak group. So your burr, white, and swamp white oak. These have rounded edges to the leaves, and these can all intermix genetically. And you can actually have hybrids. So sometimes I can throw off a forester or a landowner too. That might be looking at a leaf and be like, it kind of looks like a bur oak, but it also kind of looks just like a white oak. So keep that in mind. They can crossbreed a little bit and have some naturally different varieties. And again, with the red oak group, those can all intermix as well. So you're gonna have some variety there. The red oak typically has the least of the sinuses, the smaller of sinuses, where the black oak and northern pin oak will have deeper ones. So, but all of these can be found across the state. Here's some of the acorn comparison. You can see just some of the different shapes and sizes and whatnot. Um, so the one thing key characters to look at on there is not only the color but the shape of the cap on there can kind of sit differently depending on what species you're dealing with. So. All right, so now we're gonna go back to our key and try to identify another species of deciduous trees. So again, if you know what it is, still work through it, and we will give you a few minutes to work through your key and see what you land on. There is a little bit more options when it comes to the deciduous trees. There's more variety. So there's 2 pages there, at least on the key that I'm looking at. So a little bit more to work through, but it should be the same process. So take a couple minutes and see what you find and put it in the chat.
And while y'all are working on that, we did have a question about the emerald ash borer. And like David said in the chat, it can resprout, but as soon as the tree gets old enough, it is at risk for emerald ash borer again. So that's kind of what Ben was talking about with, we won't get big trees anymore because as soon as they get large enough, they're at risk again.
Yeah, a couple of comments on that too. So, what our forest health specialists have said is, once they get about an inch or so in diameter, they can be attacked again by the insect. So, but since the initial wave kind of went through, the populations of EAB are probably lower, and it's probably what we're going to see is once you get pockets of ash coming back, the insects might boom then too, and kind of have a reaction to it where they're able to kind of reproduce then. So you might see some come up and mature or start to mature in a medium-sized tree, but then once there's enough there, the insects might have a localized population. So it'll be around, but it just may not be here as it once was as a larger tree. See a question there on oak wilt. We will talk about oak wilt later in this presentation. So again, with this, sometimes the pictures aren't the greatest. If you're holding it in your hand, it's sometimes easier to see certain characteristics, but I'll kind of walk through it a little bit for you. Okay, we're getting some answers in here. I'm seeing a lot of birch, some aspen in there, quaking aspen. So, yep, all good answers, but it is actually a trembling aspen or quaking aspen, or sometimes known as popple. So, this one can get easily confused for birch. It looks pretty similar. The bark definitely does. I think what can throw people off is the bark is not papery on aspen. They're pretty similar species in nature, a little bit different. But I'm going to kind of go through the key here and kind of walk through the process on this one, and just to know kind of maybe where you may have tripped up or maybe have gone down the wrong road. So not surprised to see a lot of birch in there because it can be kind of confusing with the pictures. But if I'm looking at the tree ID key here, you're going to start, is this opposite or alternating branch? So we see the alternating pretty clearly on there. So that's going to take us to number 4, where it asks if it's compound leaves or simple leaf. So you can see there that there's a main branch and it's coming off individually. So we know that's a simple leaf, which takes us to number 8. Are the leaves lobed or are not lobed? You can see it's a simple round leaf, so no lobes on there. It's pretty clear. That takes us to number 9, and I think this is where maybe trip people up. It's kind of hard to tell from the picture, but is the bark papery or not papery? So the bark is actually pretty smooth. It can, when it gets bigger, you can see on that picture on the right, when it gets bigger in diameter, it can get kind of rough actually, but it's actually smooth all the way around. It kind of looks like a birch with that whitish grayish color. But it's actually pretty smooth. That birch, you'll actually get it flaking off and peeling off the tree. So from there, so we know it's not papery. We'll go to number 10 and it'll ask if the petioles are flat or round. It's kind of hard to tell from the pictures, but in this case, they would be flat on anything that's a popple. So that would take us to number 11. So that narrows it down to 3 species. It'd either be it'd be something in the populus family. So that's the scientific name, and that's helpful for foresters to know, and even for landowners, because you can kind of narrow it down to a certain family, and then there's can be similar management strategies or similar characteristics within those families, but some variations. So we know it's in the populus family. It's either cottonwood or one of the aspens. The leaf is more round than triangular. Like cottonwood will have more of like a delta looking shape to it. And then so we know it's a little more of a rounder leaf and it doesn't have the big serrations and big teeth. So we look at our 2 options, trembling aspen and big tooth aspen. This clearly doesn't have the big teeth on it. There are some serrations. So this is that quaking aspen. So it's gonna be kind of a tricky one, but hopefully people understand kind of the thought process there, and it's a little bit easier to tell in person too. So. All right. So again, here's a picture of those 3 species on the populus family. You got trembling aspen, big tooth aspen, and cottonwood. So they look pretty similar in different ways, but they kind of got their own unique thing based on the shape. And like I said, the teeth and the serrations on the edge there are just a little bit different. So we'll talk about aspen a little bit because that's another key tree species throughout the state. Aspen is important for wildlife species, notably for ruffed grouse, especially up north where there's a lot more aspen and you got larger acreages of it. It grows very fast, but it needs a lot of sunlight. It's reproduced through its root system. So basically how we'll manage it is we'll clear cut it, but then it resprouts through the root system, which is still alive, and it'll put new sucker growth up, and then those will grow up very thick and very quickly in a uniform patch. We call this coppice harvesting. Are we doing on time? Is it 6:41? Okay, I can start moving a little quicker here. I think we have till what time do we go to again?
7:30.
7:30. Okay, so we got a little bit of time. Okay. Yeah, I will keep moving along. This, like I said, aspen is used for pulp and paper commonly. But yeah, that kind of does it for the main tree species that we have. We'll go over some of the non-native invasive plants. Obviously, probably many of you know that that's quite a big problem throughout the state and affects our forest management and how we complete it. So, um, So the book term is a non-indigenous species or strains that invade natural plant communities and wild areas and replace native vegetation. Um, So yeah, like we'll go through a few of them here. Some of the main ones to consider and some identification. There is a ton of invasives, so it's hard to go over them all, but we'll talk about the main ones that specifically impact forest management more directly. So many of you probably know about buckthorn. It's a glaring issue. My opinion, it's our most problematic invasive that we have in the state. So at least in my area, it is. So there's two types. We have common and glossy buckthorn. I think I see common more often than glossy buckthorn. Um, but good way to identify it is through those purple berries. You'll see those start to develop later in the summer into the fall, and they can persist throughout the winter. Um, One thing with common buckthorn is the veins and the leaves will a lot of times go all the way up to the tip of the leaf. So a good way to identify it. Glossy buckthorn, a lot of times have more prominent veins that kind of more go outward, um, more to the side, and maybe it's a little bit more elongated. So glossy buckthorn sometimes found in more wetter areas, but this stuff kind of grows everywhere, it seems like, unless it's underwater. So. Um, Buckthorn was kind of brought over as an ornamental, but also kind of for hedgerows from like Europe and other countries. So there was a functional use of why it was brought over, and from there it kind of took over. And the reason why it's taken over so bad is because it has a competitive advantage for growth. So this picture is obviously in the fall when all the leaves are off, but the leaves on the buckthorn are still growing. So it also greens up early compared to your other trees and shrubs that are native. So it's just getting that sunlight early and be able to grow and put on pretty good amount of growth in a year. Um, Fall is a great time to identify it. It stands out like a sore thumb. So like late October into November is a good time to not only identify it, but that's also a great time of year to treat it. And we'll talk about buckthorn and brush treatment next week. So. Um, yeah, we kind of talked about this. Another way to identify it is we cut into it. It's got a real notable like orangish, pinkish interior wood to it. So some people like that. It's kind of unique. Um, to, Another thing to identify a difference, the common buckthorn, well, it's not quite opposite, but it's pretty close to being opposite branching, where the glossy will be a little bit more alternating, and the common buckthorn might even have a little bit of a arm terminal end to it where it might be spiky. Something that landowners commonly mistake is they think prickly ash is buckthorn. Buckthorn, the name sounds like it would be like this really spiky plant, but it's actually not as bad compared to other stuff that we deal with. So just keep that in mind. If it's very, very spiny, it might be something else. And things like prickly ash are actually native. So the next thing I want to talk about is bush honeysuckles. This is probably our next biggest issue for forest health issues and regeneration problems and over competition for a forest floor. These can be beneficial to wildlife, and birds and stuff love to eat those red berries off of them, but that unfortunately increases the spread that we do have throughout our forest. Again, they can really shade out an understory and prevent pretty much anything from growing if they get really out of hand. These are typically like the very first thing that'll green up in the springtime. So in March, you'll even start seeing them start to green up a little bit if it's early spring. There's a few different species out there. I don't really know the difference between them too much, but I just know what honeysuckle is, and a lot of times I'm just trying to get rid of it as best I can. So. There is native honeysuckle too. There's called fly honeysuckle. This is a good thing to have in your woods. It's a little bit different in nature and how it grows. Your bush honeysuckles are, again, hence the name, are going to be more shrubby and grow a little bit taller, where the fly honeysuckle is going to be more vine-like in nature, and maybe have a little bit different fruit on it. So good to take a look at that. You can also cut a stem off and look at the pith, and that might be an indicator of what species you have and compare it. I don't know offhand the differences between the piths, but it's something you could look up online to kind of verify and help you out. So, Just keep an eye out for that. Not every honeysuckle is bad, but most of the bush ones we see around here, the most common ones, are usually invasive. Garlic mustard is also a problem. This is not a woody plant, but it is a biennial. So it's a 2-year plant. It's pretty easy to identify and stands out. It's got that triangular shape. It can even have a garlic odor to it. Again, 2-year plant. So in the second year, it'll shoot up a few feet, and then it'll release seed before it eventually dies. And then from there, it can reproduce. It says here 500 seeds per year, which is quite a bit. And these seeds can last in the ground for quite a while. These are commonly found in established forests. They can be under the shade and do decently, seen even under sugar maple and whatnot. If you have areas that are disturbed soil, they might take advantage of that. Invasives in general will do that. But typically the garlic mustard will like more rich soils. And what I've seen, what I've heard from landowners is that the garlic mustard can come and go from year to year. Some years it'll be really bad. The next year it won't be very prevalent at all, and then it'll come back. So it's kind of hit or miss, and a lot of different methods to control it, which we'll probably go over next week between pulling and spraying. Japanese barberry is another one. This one isn't as problematic, but it is around and it's not fun to walk through. It's very spiny, and you'll know when you walk through it. It's got unique leaves on it, and I usually call it like a teardrop leaf. You can kind of see it in that picture. Um, it will have bright red fruits as well if you're in the middle of summertime. Um, these, similar to Japanese barberry, can be planted in as more ornamentals in urban areas. So I'm guessing that's how they got spread. So I think that's primarily how they started. But yeah, these don't grow as large as maybe like a honeysuckle or buckthorn, but they can still be problematic and impede growth of desirable plants and trees. And again, not fun to walk through. Next one is autumn olive. Russian olive is also a plant that we have that can be problematic. This is a bigger shrub. Key characteristics on this one is it'll have like a silvery underside to the leaf. Makes it pretty obvious. It's kind of got a similar growth pattern to maybe like a honeysuckle, but maybe a little bit bigger. So this is another one to look out for. Again, we'll go over management strategies next week, but this will be kind of similar management as you would to buckthorn and honeysuckle on this one. So again, invasive perennials, ones that keep coming back year after year, our biggest threats are woodlands. I just think of like I see it all the time, in southeast Wisconsin, where you'll have a really nice overstory, oak woodland, beautiful trees, but then the understory is just a sea of buckthorn. And you just kind of think, if these oak trees die eventually, which they will, whether it's natural or not, what's going to replace it? And the answer is, buckthorn and other brush. So when we're doing our forest management, a lot of times we're thinking of the future and trying to prepare it so that we can have that good forest succession and get what we want coming back. So with brush control, it's best to not focus on eradication, but more managing it to a place where we can get the desired outcomes we need for forest regeneration. Again, they have a lot of energy stored in their roots, so just mowing it once is not going to kill it. It's just going to come back angry, and it's going to shoot back up. Another thing I wanted to mention too is there are certain species like black locust, which can be an aggressive species that we don't want, have a kind of a clonal root system, kind of like aspen, where if you do mow it, it actually comes back worse. So we might use different techniques, like girdling a tree, instead of just mowing it down, because it's got that strong root system, and as soon as you cut it, it just shoots back up stronger. A couple others we'll go over here real quick. Oriental bittersweet. This is a vine that can climb into the overstory. I don't see this one too often, but it's around. But it can choke out trees. Our two biggest vines are this and also grapevine. The grapevine will have that pretty clear grape leaf shape to it. and these have more of a round leaf on it. So you'll see it spreading almost like a wall in your forest if it does get in there. But something to look out for if you have vines. A lot of times with vines, we have to cut and spray the ends of it to knock it out because you're not going to be able to pull out those vines from the tree. They're just too strong. Another plant, invasive plant that you should know about. This one isn't really too much of an issue with forest management because parsnip typically grows in open areas and like pastures and open fields. But it can be an issue maybe if you have a tree plantation in an open area, you might see it in there. Um, One reason we want to mention this plant is because it can hurt you and cause this and cause burns, physical burns on your skin. It has a chemical that if your skin comes in contact and is also exposed to the sun, it can actually leave like permanent scars on you. So um, something to be aware of in the summertime. If you're walking through an open field and you see something with this yellow head on there, that's good. Summertime, even if it's hot out, I like to wear sleeves and gloves and full pants because you never know what you're walking through, and it's just better safe than sorry. There are some similar plants that look like it. So I'm not an expert in these smaller non-woody plants, but um, if it's me and I'm walking through an area and I see a plant with that bright yellow head on there, I'm just going to try to avoid it as best I can and not try to walk through it. All right, so that's the invasives in a quick nutshell. Again, we'll go over control methods next week and dive into that. But yeah, next the final topic we have here is forest health concerns. So a lot of different forest health concerns we have here in the state. I think it'll vary by region, but we'll go over a few of the main ones that we deal with. The definition of a pest, it's a general term that includes insects, pathogens, or other living organisms that compete with their desires, anything that's significantly hurting, damaging, or killing our trees. So most insects, like 99% of them, are not significant pests, but as you all know, it only takes one insect to really cause a lot of issues. Like emerald ash borers, perfect example, it just absolutely decimated our forests, and some of these forests don't even exist anymore just because of one single insect. So again, sometimes it takes some time for numbers to get or for the pests to get significant, or they need high enough numbers. We see that a lot with spongy moth, which we'll talk about in a second. Like those populations can come and go, but once they're there, they can be they can be very harmful. So again, the first step is identifying the problem. Again, the growing season is when you're going to want to be looking out for forest health issues. That's usually when they show themselves. You're looking for different signs and symptoms. The symptoms are going to be the actual response by the tree. Maybe you're starting to see your tree have kind of an off color, maybe a yellowish color. Just doesn't look quite as green as it should be. Maybe the leaves are wilting, or maybe you're starting to notice some kind of cavity or canker that shouldn't be there, or that's not consistent with other trees on your property. The signs would be the actual reason why it's happening. So you might be seeing insects or the eggs, or maybe the tunnels or holes are left behind underneath the bark or on the outside of the bark. Or maybe it's a fungal disease and you're seeing a fruiting body on a stump from a tree that was cut that year or the year before. So if you start to see signs and symptoms of dying trees or just unhealthy trees, it's good to contact your local DNR forester. He can give you an assessment of what's maybe going on. It can give you some thoughts. We do have forest health specialists with the DNR and that we often utilize who are more experts in this and can actually come out and take a look at things too. And we actually do have a forest health lab that can actually test for certain things like oak wilt, for example. So if you're seeing issues with the trees in your forest, just reach out to your DNR forester and we can try to get you pointed in the right direction and get you an idea of what might be going on. Arborists are other tools too that can be utilized. Other forestry professionals, especially if you have a smaller woodland with only a couple acres. DNR foresters may not be able to come out for a small acreage like that, but arborists are also specialized in forest health issues too. Can even do treatments. So. Yeah, so we'll talk about oak wilt. It was mentioned before, so we could talk about this for a long time, but I'll go over some of the quick basics and some general techniques for control. So this is a fungal disease that's prevalent throughout the growing season, specifically usually through April through July is when that is the oak wilt risk period. You'll see the most signs of it prevalent in June through August, though. So if you see a tree, like an oak tree on your property in the middle of the summer that's going from perfectly green to brown within a few weeks and is dropping leaves like it's autumn, contact your DNR forester because there's a decent chance it might be oak wilt. You see there in the leaves, sometimes they'll be partially green still. So how this disease works, it's a fungal disease that if you have a wound on an oak tree, let's say you either prune it, maybe you cut down, you leave a stump, or maybe there's a windstorm that damages one of your oak trees, leaves an open wound, and the fungal spores can get into that wound a couple different ways. It can spread through air. That's less common. You'd have to have another oak tree infected with oak wilt nearby to spread the spores through the fungal mats. But the most common way it's spread is through sap-sucking insects that carry fungal spores from those fungal mats and are going to these wounds on the oak trees and then getting that fungus into the tree, into its vascular system. Essentially, it's going to be blocking its ability to transport nutrients, and that's why you see such a rapid die-off. So here's an example of a tree. I'm not sure how far apart these pictures were taken between dates, but this can happen within a couple weeks. A tree could look like it is on the left, and then a couple weeks later, it can look like the one on the right. So, within maybe a month, it could be severely different. So it happens fast. Once a tree has got oak wilt, it's a goner. But we can start to get ahead of it and try to protect our other trees around it. So again, it's the big issue with oak wilt though is the underground spread. So this disease also spreads through root grafts underneath the ground. So if you have a dense forest of oak, it can spread in a pocket, start small, and keep getting bigger and bigger exponentially, and keep growing this big pocket, going tree to tree through root grafts, and it can become a real problem. So it's good to identify oak wilt early, so that you can take proper management strategies. Because the that bigger that oak wilt patch gets, the harder it's going to be to manage. So speaking of management, essentially what you got to do is discontinue those root connections somehow. One method is through actually severing the roots and putting a trench around around the pocket, but that's usually not recommended because the success rate isn't always the greatest and it's also costly. The best way to do it is to put in a buffer of trees. You're basically intentionally killing off live trees that are still healthy around that buffer of oak wilt trees, and then you're treating the stumps with herbicide to then kill off that root system so that the oak wilt cannot spread to more living tissue. So unfortunately, you typically have to sacrifice a lot of good trees to stop oak wilt, but in the long term, it's worth it because it's likely inevitable that those next trees will get it. Just that's why it's so important to identify it early because the bigger that patch gets, the more trees you're going to have to take out. Again, there's two different oak groups, red oak group and the white oak group. Typically, the trees that are in the red oak group are more prone to oak wilt and usually have more severe symptoms and die more rapidly, where the white oak group is usually not as affected as bad. Another thing I'll mention too is that generally the red oak trees will only graft to the red oak trees and the white oak trees to the white oaks. So if you have a mix of both, there's a chance, like if you had a red oak tree that was infected with oak wilt, the neighboring white oak might not get it. So, but always good to get in touch with the forester so they can help you out with management because there's specific methods that we need to utilize to kind of combat this. The next issue I want to talk about is spongy moth. This was formerly known as gypsy moth. You may have heard that. The name changed a few years ago. So if you ever heard of that, it's now spongy moth. This is a defoliating insect. That can be problematic, especially with our oak trees and a lot of our hardwood trees. We've had some issues with it in the southeast part of the state. I saw some pretty bad spongy moth issues on the southern Kettle Moraine State Forest. Some areas even had a lot of mortality. So these insects will come and go. We had a bad outbreak for a couple years. Last year it was better. If it's drier, the insects and the caterpillars can survive better. if it's a little bit wetter in the springtime. I think it's like some kind of fungus that actually kills them off and lowers their population. So we had a little bit more of a wet spring last year, so the populations were good, or good in our favor. Um, Trees can handle defoliation like this decently. They could be completely defoliated in the summer and then just bounce back next year like nothing happened. But the problem happens when this happens multiple years in a row. It can be just too much stress for a tree. Trees can put out new leaves in the same growing season. I've seen it, but they're usually just not quite the same, not quite as large or robust. What can also be an issue is if, let's say, an oak tree is already stressed from something else, for whatever other issue, maybe it's not in a good soil or just not, maybe it's already droughty. Then you add another stressor on, like spongy moth, that can be enough to kill it. Sometimes with trees, it's not always one single thing that's killing the tree. Sometimes it can be multiple stressors that are just adding up to enough where the tree just can't handle it anymore. So you can see the picture of what the caterpillar looks like on the bottom right there. There's some other caterpillar species that look kind of similar, but the key giveaway is to look at those colored spots, count how many of the red and the blue there are. I forget how many it is with spongy moth, but that's a good thing to look out for. And then you can also see their egg masses too in certain times of year, and they'll eventually turn to moths. Um, Again, it mostly goes for the hardwoods. Oak is the main one, but they're going to start eating the leaves beginning in mid-May, as soon as those leaves kind of pretty much fully leaf out. Next, talk about root diseases briefly. So if you're seeing an issue with the canopy of your tree, a lot of times it means there's an issue farther down where the nutrients aren't getting transported, or there might be some kind of fungal disease. Um, Root diseases can spread underground from tree to tree as well, just kind of like oak wilt, and can leave a lot of dead standing trees in your forest. A common one or notable one that we see here in Wisconsin is heterobasidian root disease, called HRD for short. This is a fungal disease. A lot of times you can get introduced through timber harvesting. You see there on the picture on the right, you have a stump from a tree that was harvested, and you have that fungal body on there. When we harvest trees, basically from April through November, we want to make sure, or when we're harvesting conifers specifically in that time frame, we want to make sure that we're treating the stumps to prevent this fungal disease from establishing, because it only takes one stump for those fungal spores to get on there, and then it can go tree to tree, and you can see dieback from there. And just like oak wilt, it'll spread out and get exponentially bigger over time, and it can be really difficult to do that. So if you're harvesting conifers, you can definitely do it in the summertime. That's probably when loggers are going to want to do it. Just make sure that they're treating the stumps. Most good loggers will know to do that. Next thing we'll talk about, I think is the last item before questions, is bark beetles. Bark beetles themselves won't kill off a tree, but they like to target stress trees. So trees could be stressed for a number of different reasons. Maybe it's poor soil, maybe it's too much water, not enough water, be a lot of different things. But this can kind of be like the final nail in the coffin for a tree. Just stressing it out even further. You'll see typically with bark beetles like pinhole size holes throughout the tree. And you'll even see some engravings underneath if you peel the bark back. So this is an example of a species that can kind of have a local boom in population and kind of spread from there. So sometimes what we'll do is try to salvage and take out some of the infested trees before they have a chance to spread even further to maybe other stressed trees. So again, it's best to thin and do the harvesting in the winter months, but it can be tough because typically loggers want to do the hardwood harvest in the wintertime because it's higher value and it's usually need frozen ground for some of those. Usually pine plantations are easier to access in the summertime. So it'd be hard to convince a logger to cut pine in the wintertime, but it's in general better for a lot of different forest health reasons to do logging in the wintertime if you can. So promoting species diversity is also helpful. If you have less of a monoculture, you might not have as big of a quick boom in population because there's less host trees for certain insects. So But yeah, that kind of goes over forest health real quick. There's a lot of different other topics and different forest health issues we have going on. But those are kind of the main ones. But yeah, with that, I guess we can go over questions. I don't know, Johanna and Olivia, if you've been tracking them, but I'd be happy to take a few while we still have some time here.
Yeah, we have plenty of time for questions. I think that if we wanted to, you can either type questions that you have in the chat, or if you go down to the React, which it's a heart, you can raise your hand if you want to unmute and ask your question. But if we raise our hand, that way we can make sure we're going one at a time. But just farther back, one of the questions that we got was, what can you replace ash with?
Yeah, that's a good question. So first I'll say if you're looking to reforest an area, talk to your local DNR forester and they can help you out with creating a planting plan and deciding which trees. It's going to be very site specific. Depends on soil type. It's also going to depend on how wet it is there. A lowland, if it's like a lowland swamp where you maybe had like green ash or black ash, a lot of times like things like swamp white oak, maybe silver maple. You can even try like tamarack, some lowland species like that. If it's more like white ash in the upland areas, your typical hardwood species like red oak, sugar maple, hickory, black cherry, things like that. So it's hard to say specifically without seeing your specific site. But I'd say talk to your DNR forester and they can help you kind of game plan that and kind of give you a good planting plan on how to approach it and what to put in, and also how to like how many trees to put in, and also how to maintain it, because that's a big part of tree planting that needs to be done. Proper planning is important.
Great. We had another question of, do you have a favorite tree ID app?
Um, the one I use is called Seek, Seek. It's I believe run through National Geographic. I've utilized that one and it's pretty good for the most part, but there's a lot of them out there. I haven't really played with too many other ones, but that's the one I typically use.
Yeah, iNaturalist is another option. It's, I think, kind of made by the same people who do Seek as well. There are also some that you can pay for if you want to do that. So I've seen some of that as well. Okay, and then we had another question. I have a lot of dead ash trees which have been dead for a while. Are these an issue leaving those stands for bird perches?
Nope. Yeah, if you have dead ash trees, it's perfectly fine to leave them. It's good for wildlife. Woodpeckers will utilize them too, and a lot of different other things. In general, with dead trees in your forest, unless they're infected with a certain disease, it's perfectly fine to leave dead trees to decay. It's good for soil, good for wildlife. So, but there could be some instances where, like oak wilt, there could be some issues leaving dead standing trees because you could be, leaving a tree there with fungal mats underneath the bark that could spread oak wilt. So, but in general, if it's just dead tree from insects, you can leave it be and kind of decay naturally. So
Great. And then we have another question. Um, will you touch on controlling floribunda hedgerows? I don't know if I said that right.
I'm not familiar with what that is.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure.
I haven't seen that in Wisconsin either. Linda, do you have that on your property? Linda's typing in the chat. We can ask Andrew's question about, does buckthorn affect the soil?
It's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I don't think it affects it too much. I don't think it really changes the acidity or anything like that. It could affect, it leaves the soil pretty bare underneath because it grows so thick. So you could have, some runoff nutrients. I think maybe. Um, So like again, it can leave it pretty bare. But typically areas where we like clear buckthorn and go to replant trees, we usually don't have any issue getting trees reestablished as long as we can get the buckthorn under control. So I don't think it really decimates the soil too much. But again, it can leave it pretty bare underneath if it gets really established.
And then, yes, we had a question in the chat, and we have a couple folks. So to answer the question quickly in the chat, yes, I can send you all the PDFs for all of the presentations that we do, so you have them as a resource. Les, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? And it seems like you might still be muted. If you hit the little audio microphone on the bottom left, that should unmute you, unless the hand raise was an accident. Okay, well, why don't we, Roland, do you want to go ahead and ask your question and we can come back to Les?
Yeah. I have a lot of buckthorn, and I guess who doesn't? But is there any difference between the invasiveness between the two different types of buckthorn? I mean, should I be focusing on one species versus another? Because I definitely see differences in the bark and everything between them. Because it's everywhere, you know.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not sure if one is more aggressive than the other. They both are pretty aggressive. Um, my recommendation in trying to determine where to start with prioritization is just try to figure out which parts of the property you want to start with first, and don't bite off more than you can chew. It's better to be systematic and work one chunk at a time instead of targeting individual plants throughout the property, just because you can lose progress pretty quickly when they resprout. So that'd be my suggestion. Another thing that I've seen landowners do and is a decent suggestion is to, this works better on a smaller property, but if you see a lot of the female plants with the berries on them, some landowners will target these bigger plants to try to eliminate that ongoing seed source, just to try to slow it down a little bit. So you could potentially do that as well. But there's likely, if it's well established, there's likely a pretty good seed source, and
Yeah.
those seeds can last, 3 or so years in the soil and still survive. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks.
So it looks like Les unmuted, so I'm gonna give Les the opportunity to ask their question, and then I will come back because Linda had a question about multiflora rose. So Les, why don't we start with you first, though? Seems like we're still not hearing you, but it looks like you unmuted.
Potentially put it in the chat too if you're not
Yeah.
able to get the audio through.
Yeah, maybe try typing it in the chat. But Ben, do you have any advice about multiflora rose?
Yeah, so that's a nasty one. It grows very thick and very painful. So typically forestry mulching is going to be the way to go for that just because it's so thick. So Nick will talk about this next week more in depth, so that'd be a good time to ask about that. But in general, with multiflora rose, you're gonna want to forestry mulch it, and then you're gonna have to hit the resprouts with an herbicide. I don't deal with control of that very often, so I can't tell you the herbicide off the top of my head, but we do have cheat sheets that we can look at, and I can always give you that information. But yeah, typically forestry mowing is the easiest way to go because hand treating that stuff is really difficult with it, how it grows.
So we have Will and Ann said, what in general would you say constitutes a small property?
Yeah, that's definitely subjective, or it's definitely up to opinion on what you think is a small property. I would typically say under 10 acres is a generally smaller property. You can tackle 10 acres at a time if you have some resources. Once it gets more than that, once projects get over 10 acres, that can be pretty difficult. So I would say under 10, but that can vary. If you're trying to target individual buckthorn, maybe you want a smaller property like under 5 acres, but it's up to opinion on what you think is a small property. So,
And We'll also, in the last class, talk about different programs and opportunities, and we'll be sure to talk about, what size property different programs can help and with that. Okay, so we had a question about poison ivy. Can poison ivy be managed? It's spreading way too much in our woods.
Yep, it can be to herbicide. I'm pretty sure I know glyphosate will work with it, which is like basically what Roundup is, but that will kill pretty much everything. But you can foliar treat that. I've seen poison ivy when I used to work on the southwest part of the state and some of the river bottoms. Like you can get like real thick vines that can crawl up trees and like be nasty stuff. So it can be controlled, but it can be a tricky one. But I think foliar treatments are the way to go with that. It's tough because if you're doing foliar treatments, you might be killing off other things next to it too, just because of herbicide drift. Depends how bad. If it's a real bad outbreak of it and it's pretty much a consistent patch of it, then yeah, it could be well worth it. If it's a little bit more scattered, you know, not too many landowners try to tackle it. But if you're frequently using your woods, if you're walking through or if kids or something like that, that might be a higher priority for you.
And then we had a question about goats. The conservancy across the road had heard of goats munching on the underbrush for a while. How effective is that approach?
Yeah. I'm not an expert in goats, but it's definitely a management tool. So they'll eat everything though. That's the downside is everything that's in there they're going to eat. And obviously to be effective, it's got to be, smaller stuff. So, if you have large established stuff, it's not really going to work. So you're going to want to, knock it down, maybe brush mow it and then put them in there, so they can munch it. With buckthorn and some other invasives, like if you keep mowing it or knocking it out, or in this case, goats, if you keep taking away that foliage, eventually that tree or plant, that brush will run out of energy reserves and can die off, but takes a lot of time. Sometimes it's oak, or with goats, you might need a supplement with other strategies too. The hard part is you gotta kind of move them around too, and there's a lot of maintenance work. So sometimes it's easier just to go in there with herbicide and a little quicker and easier and less management. But not every landowner wants to use herbicides, so that could be an alternative.
Yeah. We have some folks talking about some of the management techniques they've used in the comments. Linda has been doing some mowing in the fall. So, and she plans to keep treating it, and then also talking about another solution for poison ivy as well in the chat. There any other questions? We still got some time. Okay, we just
Looks like
had
we got
a,
a hand up
yeah,
there.
the person that just raised their hand, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I have a lot of buckthorn on my property also, but I have a lot of other trees, and I kind of been concentrating on cutting the buckthorn down below the larger trees. Is that a worthwhile start?
So you're saying you have like a good overstory, but you're cutting the buckthorn, the main brush directly underneath it.
Yeah, because some of it's growing right into the limbs of like oak trees, and well, the hickories are pretty straight up tall, but um and then I think once I get the bigger ones out of there, I can mow the smaller ones down.
Hmm.
That's kind of how I've been taking care of it, but I got a ways to go.
Yeah, I think it can definitely be worthwhile. If the overstory trees are real tall and well above the buckthorn is probably not going to affect it too much because they have a well-developed canopy that's way over the height that they'll ever get. But again, we kind of want to think about future management and regeneration. So getting a start on that and knocking it back over time, and then not just knocking it back, but maintaining it, we'll see conditions come back to what we more need. And then from there, to get oak regeneration or whatever you have in your woods, there'll be other management strategies for thinning or overstory removal, things like that, which you can talk to your local forester about. But yeah, picking away at the buckthorn one chunk at a time, you'll slowly see progress over time. So I think it's worth your while to get started on that. Again, there might be certain priority areas that you feel are more important that you want to see regeneration in sooner because maybe it's more of an open canopy. But yeah, just I think it's worthwhile.
Does that help to let more water get to the roots of the tree?
There could be some competition for that. I think for an oak tree, like some of these, especially if they're large, they have such a deep taproot that I don't think it's affecting it too much for water resources. Specifically for that, if it was maybe younger trees, I feel like that could be more of an issue. But I think for established canopy trees, not as much.
Okay, thank you.
And then we had a question in the chat. It's what cutting repetition would you need to get rid of garlic mustard plants?
That's a good question. I've heard varying opinions on some. I've heard some people say pulling can actually make it worse and expedite it. So the question was about how often to cut it. Um, so again, with the garlic mustard, is that second year of growth is where it's going to actually put on seed. So if you can get it knocked back before it develops, that seed is important. I'm not sure off the top of my head what time of year it actually puts out those seed heads. Um, but yeah, keep knocking it back that way. Um,
I
and again,
think it's in June, like early summer, that
yeah,
it starts doing that.
yeah. So you'll see it bolt up because in the first year it stays low like that, and the second year it'll put on a couple feet and it'll bolt up. So
And then we had another question about what should you do with the cut buckthorn? Should you burn it?
yeah, so if you're doing like cut stump treatments and you have big piles laid up, I've seen landowners do a few things. You can burn it, but you want to be doing that safely. Just a plug because I'm part of our fire program too within the DNR. Spring is our spring fire season. That's when fire danger is the highest. Fall is also tough. So if you can burn it with full snow cover, that'll prevent any forest fire issues. But you can definitely burn it. Check with your local municipality for permits and things like that and what you need to do. Otherwise, some people chip it. One thing you got to be careful about chipping is that you can have a lot of seed in those wood chips. So if you do chip it, be very careful what you do with those wood chips because if you have paths in your wood and decide to wood chip your path, you're just going to be spreading seed further throughout your property. Um, but some people, like I said, will even pile it up and then heavy equipment like forestry mulch it down to nothing. So if you have a real thicket of of brush, sometimes forestry mulching is the best way. You can just knock it down right away. But yeah, it can be tough because those piles add up pretty quick.
Okay, and then Brad and Pam, did y'all have a question you wanted to ask? You might need to unmute though. Just the microphone button, if you click it. Okay. We'll try to come back to you, or if you want to try typing it in the chat, you could do that as well. Um, Les, are you able to ask a question now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, well, good. Thank you. Uh, I live down Walworth County, town of LaGrange, got 6 acres, mostly oaks and that had ash, but I've lost all those. But about 3, 4 years ago, the spongy moth caterpillars visited, and I've lost lots of oak trees. I'm having 5 removed right now. And is there anything, and I apologize, I came in late to your presentation, but is there any way to know when the gypsy moths are going to be prevalent or whatever, anything I can do to, if I know they're coming or whatever, when I see them as you showed, with the exhibits, spray, I bought some stuff, but I'm looking for any, remedies I can find.
Yeah, so right now, I had mentioned in my presentation is that the populations are expected to be low this year. And again, they're going to kind of come and go. Again, if we get wetter springs and whatnot, the population's typically not as bad. So last year, the populations got knocked back. So our forest health specialists have said that they don't expect it to be bad this year. Um, but conducting some of that thinning now could be good on this down period. But yeah, it's tough. And if you only have 6 acres, you might be able to do some individual treatments a little bit, but it's really tough with large canopy trees. You can try to remove as many egg masses as possible and put it in soapy water to try to kill them before they, or if you're seeing caterpillars too, you can put like bands, like sticky bands around trees to try to capture them and get them stuck and then put them in soapy water to kill them off, especially with higher value trees. So stuff with more established forests, it's easier to do individual treatments, insecticides on more ornamental trees, but there are some options to maybe reduce the populations a little bit. But hopefully it's kind of in a lull for the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so I think we're gonna just have the one more question. Brad and Pam, are y'all able to ask your question?
Yes, you hear me?
Yes.
After I've thinned out the buckthorn and I expect it to resprout from the seed bed, is chemical eradication, or what do you think about fire?
So fire is a more of a maintenance tool than an eradication tool. So we do use it. I do a lot of prescribed burning on state lands in the springtime, and that is a tool we use. It's not going to eradicate it. It's more going to set it back. It's more going to top kill it than anything. It can fully kill it if the intensity is good enough, but it should be seen as more of a maintenance tool once it's already knocked back rather than an elimination tool.
Yeah, that's what I'm considering. I've already cut, mulched, shredded it up, but I expect it to come back, and I have other areas where I see that it's a ground cover.
Yeah.
And I've sprayed that, but I'm wondering if I could just burn it
Yeah,
when
if
it's
you
still
could.
small.
Yeah, if you consistently burn it while it's small like that, it can just buy you some time every year, and then you can maybe keep up on other treatments and slowly knock it back. So again, it can just kind of keep things even and just prevent it from establishing further.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so we have a couple more questions, but I'm going to ask that folks hold on to them for next week, especially because next week we're going to be talking a lot more about managing the different things that we talked about today and what you can do in your woods. So it might help answer some of these questions. Um, so we'll plan on talking about that next week. But yeah, just as a reminder, we will be back here again at 6 on next Wednesday. And we will have another DNR forester with us as well. And so he'll be talking more about some of these management practices. You all should expect to see an email from me at the end of this week where I will have the presentation that we just had. I'll have a recording of this if you want to go back and watch it, as well as I will have resources for the next class that we're going to be having. So look for that from me. But yeah, I think that is everything that I needed to say to y'all. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. That was great.